I have told this story perhaps 100 times now. Officials have asked me to recount it. Journalists have begged for interviews. Fellow merchants refuse to believe it until I show them the maintenance log stamped with Terran naval codes. But no matter how many times I tell it, my hands still tremble at the same part every time. Not the part you would expect. Not when the warships arrived. Not when their soldiers walked through our corridors. My hands tremble at the moment one of them offered me a glass of water and asked if I was cold. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it began, with a broken switch on a dying ship. My name is Talvesi Rin, and at the time of this incident, I was the junior communications officer aboard the Whisper of Dusk, a Valori mineral ore hauler, registered out of Ketha Station. If you are imagining something grand, please stop. The Whisper of Dusk was a slow, rusted, wheezing barge, held together by cheap welding, and the crew's collective refusal to acknowledge how bad things really were. I was 23 cycles old, on my third deep space rotation, and my primary job was making sure the comms board did not catch fire during routine diagnostics. The comms board deserves its own description. It was ancient. Half the toggle switches had been replaced so many times that the labels no longer matched what they actually did. The frequency filter had been jammed for 2 months, and nobody had bothered to fix it properly because replacement parts cost money, and our captain, Dorith Ewan, believed that anything still technically functioning did not require repair. On the day everything changed, I was running a standard diagnostic sweep. I needed to reset the jammed frequency filter, which required toggling a sequence of switches in order. I followed the labels. The labels were wrong. Instead of resetting the filter, I triggered a broadband distress beacon, a universal SOS pulse, on every channel, including the deep-range emergency bands that stretch across half the galaxy. I did not realize what I had done for nearly 4 minutes. When I checked the transmission log and saw the entry, I felt something cold settle into my stomach, like a stone dropped into still water. I tried to cancel it immediately. The system informed me, with the cheerful indifference of old software, that the pulse had already propagated beyond recall range. I told Captain Ewan. He closed his eyes for a long moment, sighed the sigh of a man who has been exhausted for decades, and told me to broadcast a retraction on all channels. SOS sent in error. No emergency. Disregard. I did so. I sent it 14 times. The captain docked my pay for the day, the crew laughed at me over dinner, and everyone assumed the matter was finished. Within 30 minutes, a Thessic patrol corvette contacted us to ask if we needed assistance. Captain Newton politely declined and thanked them. A Drenari Freight Guild sent an automated inquiry. He declined that as well. This was normal galactic procedure. A mistaken SOS is embarrassing, nothing more. Everyone who hears the retraction moves on with their day. Everyone except the humans. I did not learn until much later what happened when our signal reached Terran space. I have since read the reports and spoken to people who understand human military doctrine far better than I do. What I learned still keeps me awake some nights. Among the 1,000 species of the galactic Concord, a retracted SOS closes the file. The distress is cancelled. Resources are redirected. This is logical. This is efficient. The humans do not operate this way. They follow something called Standing Order 11, a doctrine inherited from an old Earth institution known as a Coast Guard. The rule is simple, and by the standards of every other species I have ever encountered, it is completely unreasonable. Every distress signal is real until physically verified otherwise. No exceptions. No remote retractions accepted. Our retraction did not stop the human response. It made it faster. Because in human tactical thinking, a retraction sent shortly after a distress call is a sign that someone is being forced to call off their own rescue. To them, our polite correction sounded like a hostage reading a script. 2 hours after the incident, I was sitting at my console feeling sorry for myself when the long-range sensors began to register something unusual. Multiple slip-space rupture signatures, converging on our position, moving at speeds that no merchant vessel could achieve. I reported it to Captain Yusun. He told me to identify the approaching ships. I queried the database. It returned one match, and beneath it, a classification tag printed in red warning text that I will never forget for as long as I live. Terran Naval Armada. Contact Class. Extreme Threat. Do not engage under any circumstances. The captain looked at me. I looked at him. Neither of us spoke. Then space broke open around us. I do not know how else to describe it. The stars bent. The hull groaned. Reality itself seemed to fold and tear in a perfect sphere around our tiny ore hauler. And through those tears came the ships. Not one, not five. 37 vessels of the Terran United Navy's 9th Rapid Response Group dropped out of slipspace in a formation I recognized from my academy textbooks as a rescue cage, a sphere pattern designed to surround, shield, and secure a distress zone from every possible angle. I will tell you what I saw, and I need you to understand that I am not exaggerating. 4 battlecruisers, each one larger than a Valori orbital station, took position at the cardinal points around us, like sentinels made of dark metal and light. 12 destroyers spread into screening positions, their sensors already sweeping every direction for threats. Fighter craft launched from the carriers in smooth, practiced waves, not in attack formation, but in search and rescue patrol patterns, fanning out to look for survivors, debris, anything. Electronic warfare ships flooded every frequency with counter-jamming signals, just in case someone nearby was suppressing our communications. And at the center of it all, drifting toward us with the slow grace of something that has nowhere to hurry, because nothing in the universe would dare interfere with it, was the hospital carrier. The 2-1, Mercy Unbroken. It was the size of a small moon, covered in docking arms and shuttle bays, and its hull was painted white with a red cross that I later learned is an ancient human symbol meaning sanctuary. They had brought a fleet capable of winning a war. They had brought it to answer a distress call from a 12-person ore hauler in the middle of empty space. The comms channel opened. The voice was human, female, calm and precise in the way that only someone accustomed to crisis can be. Distressed vessel. This is Admiral Coraline Voss, Terran United Navy 9th Rapid Response Group. We have received your SOS and are on station. Identify your emergency. If you are unable to respond, hold position. We are sending boarding teams for direct assessment. You are safe now. Captain Yoon took over the comms because I could not make my hands stop shaking. He explained, his voice cracking in places, that the SOS had been sent by mistake. A faulty switch, a mislabeled console. There was no emergency. We were fine. He was very sorry for the inconvenience. Please, he said, please go away. There was a pause. Then Admiral Voss responded, and I could hear something in her tone that might have been a smile. Understood, Captain. Glad to hear it. We will just need to visually confirm your crew's safety and run a structural scan of your vessel. Standard procedure. Should take about 40 minutes. Sit tight. A shuttle detached from the nearest destroyer and docked with us. The airlock opened, and 12 humans walked aboard the Whisper of Dusk. They wore rescue-rated exosuits, not quite military armor, not quite civilian clothing, something in between that radiated quiet competence. They were enormous by our standards, broad and dense, moving through our narrow corridors with a careful grace that suggested they were very aware of how much larger they were than us, and were trying not to be intimidating. They were failing at that last part, but I could see they were trying. They spread through the ship with practiced efficiency. 2 of them checked the hull integrity with scanning equipment I had never seen before. 1 inspected our cargo hold. 3 examined the engine room. The rest moved through the living quarters, checking atmosphere composition, radiation levels, structural stability. I stood frozen near the comm station, watching them. I expected orders, demands, some display of authority. Instead, one of them, a medic whose suit was marked with the name Kowalski, stopped in front of me and tilted his head slightly to look at my face. "Hey," he said. "You're shaking. Do you need some water? I've got a thermal blanket if you're cold." I nearly broke down right there. I managed to shake my head and whisper that I was fine. He nodded, gave me a look that suggested he did not entirely believe me, and moved on. The humans insisted, politely and with absolutely no room for negotiation, on giving every crew member a basic medical scan. They had equipment calibrated for Valori physiology, which meant they had prepared for the possibility that the species sending the distress call might be ours. They had prepared for every species. The hospital carrier behind them had medical bays designed to treat over 100 known species in the galaxy. During the scans, they found something. Our engineer, old Hasek, had an undiagnosed microfracture in his dorsal ridge. The human medic explained gently that if left untreated, it would become a serious spinal emergency within a year. They gave Hasek a temporary stabilizing brace from their own supplies, and transmitted his complete medical file to the nearest Valori clinic so he could receive proper treatment at the next port. Hasek, who had been complaining about back pain for months and ignoring it because he could not afford a medical visit, sat very still while they fitted the brace and said nothing at all. Then they found our water recycler. It had been producing trace chemical contaminants for what they estimated was at least 6 months. Nothing immediately lethal, but enough to slowly degrade our health over time. None of us had noticed, because the decline was so gradual that we simply accepted feeling a little worse each day as normal. The humans fixed it, in 20 minutes. With parts they fabricated on the spot from raw materials they carried aboard their shuttle for exactly this kind of situation. As they worked, I found myself standing near Kowalski again. The question had been building inside me since the moment 37 warships tore open the sky above our little ship, and I could not hold it any longer. Why? I asked. We sent the retraction. Every other species accepted it. Why did you come with all of this for a cancelled distress call? He stopped what he was doing. He looked at me with an expression I could not quite read, something old and heavy behind his eyes. Because 600 years ago, he said, a ship called the Titanic sent a distress signal in the middle of an ocean on our homeworld. The nearest vessel heard it, decided it probably was not serious, and went back to sleep. 1,500 people died in freezing water, waiting for help that never came. He paused. We made a promise after that. A lot of promises, actually, after a lot of tragedies. And the promise that stuck, the one we wrote into our laws and our military codes and our bones, was this. If there is even a chance that someone needs us, we come, all of us, every time. He looked around at our shabby, creaking little ship, and then back at me. We would rather show up to a false alarm 1,000 times than miss one real call. Admiral Voss contacted us one final time before they left. She informed Captain Ewan that our ship had been flagged for recommended maintenance at the next port, that Hasek's medical referral had been filed, and that the water recycler repair should hold for at least 2 standard years. She wished us safe travels and fair trading. Then 37 warships folded back into slip space and vanished, as though they had never been there. The whole encounter lasted under 2 hours. The crew did not speak for a long time afterward. Hasek kept touching the brace on his back. Our engineer stood by the water recycler, listening to it hum cleanly for the first time in months. Captain Ewan sat in his chair and stared at nothing for an entire shift. I returned to my console. I looked at the comms board, the same mislabeled, broken-down antique that had started all of this. I thought about the Thesic corvette that had called, heard our retraction, and moved on. Proper protocol. I thought about the Drenari Guild that had sent their automated query and accepted our response without question, efficient, rational. And then I thought about the humans, who heard the same retraction and sent a fleet anyway, because protocol is not the same thing as conscience, and efficiency is not the same thing as compassion. I used to wonder why every species in the Concord speaks about the humans with such unease. I assumed it was because of their warships, their technology, their stubborn refusal to lose any conflict they enter. Now I understand. That is not why we are afraid of them. We are afraid of them because they care. Completely, recklessly, overwhelmingly. They care the way a force of nature moves, not asking whether you want it, not checking whether it is convenient, not pausing to consider whether it makes strategic sense. They simply come. They come with everything they have, and they do not stop until they are certain you are safe. There is nothing in this galaxy more terrifying, or more beautiful, than a species that will cross the stars to save a stranger. And me? I never did fix that comms board. Some part of me, the part that still remembers the sound of Kowalski's voice, and the sight of old Hasek sitting quietly while strangers repaired his broken spine, that part of me thinks, maybe I will leave it exactly as it is, just in case.